Mr. Davis cell phone or something. It is. I can't see. It's my computer. And it's my other phone. I got too many phones to keep up with.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started with our Crime Commission meeting. This is the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Today's September 12th, 2024. We'll start with roll call.
Commissioner Page,
Here.
Commissioner Webb,
Present.
Commissioner Bess,
Present.
Commissioner Bell, Commissioner McCarter, Commissioner Dobbs,
Here.
Commissioner Ott,
Here.
Commissioner Greer, I'm sorry, Commissioner Wilson,
Here.
and Commissioner Gregory.
Here.
Jerry, have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Well, next item is approval of the minutes. They were distributed over the past week by email. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, if there are no objections.
I move for the,
Objections? Yes.
for the adoption of the minutes.
Motion for adoption is recognized. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Minutes are approved. So welcome to our Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. We have a full agenda today, including reports from our Justice Services Director, Keto Bess. We'll have a report from our Police Department, from Chief Gregory. And we also want to recognize our new Violence Prevention Coordinator, Tom Kreese, who is working with Save Lives Now, an anti-violence effort that's led by myself and St. Louis City Mayor Tashara Jones. I would also like to introduce the newest member of our commission, Terry Wilson. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you, Dr. Page. Pleasure to
Terry.
be here.
We're glad to have you. Terry is a member of the Jennings City Council and also serves as the city administrator for the city of Delwood. Let's move to the first or the next item on our agenda is a report from Chief Gregory. Chief.
Good morning, all. First of all, I'd like to take a minute to introduce to the board our new Deputy Chief, Lieutenant Colonel Juan Cox. Thanks for being here, Chief. Right off the bat, I want to report on notable events for year-to-date numbers. And right off the bat, we have notable events. First thing that you'll see there is citizen complaints. Citizen complaints are complaints that come in from the citizens involving police officers. As you can see of those numbers, I don't see the slide moving up there. Oh, okay, there we go. If you can see the citizen complaints, they're up about 14%, and that's not a big number. From 23 of this time in 23 to this time in 24, we've had one more citizen complaint. If you look at internal investigations, those are investigations that are simulated within the police department. That's just an idea of how we police ourselves when we handle these internal complaints. And as you can see, those numbers are down about 12%, which tells me our officers are pretty much behaving themselves. Department vehicle accidents are down. That's a great number for any police agencies. Vehicle pursuits are down, again, a good number that we love to see, fewer pursuits. The last thing that you'll see there is failures to yield. Basically, those are when police lights up a vehicle, for whatever reason, the vehicle doesn't stop, they take off, and they're gone. Those numbers are down, and they have been going down year to year. I doubt seriously that the last law that was signed, the Antonio Valentine law, I think it's too early to determine whether that has anything to do with the failure to yields. That law was passed on August the 28th, and already in the state of Missouri, we've had that law looked into with the death of a police officer who was killed in a vehicle pursuit. And just yesterday in St. Louis County, we had an incident where that law was used, the Antonio Valentine law. Basically, it increases the sentencing, discipline for anyone that's caught leaving, not stopping for the police. So it's helped out already quite a bit. And again, it was named after Detective Antonio Valentine of our department, who was killed in a vehicle pursuit back in December of 2021. The next slide you'll see there is the heat chart for failure to yields. We have the most in the North County precinct. Second, we have the most failure to yields in Jennings. And fourth, the third is in the fourth precinct with the failure to yields. The next slide are some of the highlights that we've had year to date. Our department has made over 870 arrests. One of the things that we do with arrests is obviously when there's a charge, they go to jail. But another thing that we do is that we try to divert a lot of the arrests, minor arrests, to the prosecuting attorney's office for them to be dealt with. We've seized over 111 guns year to date, and we've had 48 DWI arrests. Those arrests are mostly performed by a highway safety team. On the next slide, you'll see crimes against persons. Year to date, we are one more homicide than we had in 2023. Those numbers and crimes against persons were mainly driven up by aggravated assaults, mainly a lot of fist fights. Pretty much is what's driving those numbers up. Assault intimidations, just verbal threats against each other. Those are the two instances that are driving our assault numbers up with crimes against persons. Getting back to homicides on the next chart. This is a chart that we do on a weekly basis. And you can see that up to this point in 2024, we have investigated 49 homicides. That number went up over the weekend when we had 2 more homicides that occurred in 2 different municipalities, one in Ferguson and one in Northwoods. When you look at the 49, well, actually now 51 of those homicides, they're broken down. We investigate homicides for our own department, areas that we patrol, contract areas, and others. But we're also to investigate homicides if a municipality calls us in to handle that homicide. So that's how the number gets up to 49. There are 30 in St. Louis County, 9, actually now 21 in municipal cities. The weapon used mostly in homicides is a firearm. The motives for most of these homicides are either personal or domestic. We have had a very successful rate in clearing homicides to the rate of, we clear about 75% of our homicides. The national clearance rate is about 52%. Crimes against property, you look at those numbers, you'll see that the theft from motor vehicles are going down. I know there was a time not too long ago when there was a big discussion about catalytic converters being stolen. Those numbers are going down, actually with a lot of patrol, special enforcements that we have. You look at motor vehicle theft, those numbers are going down. I asked our sergeant yesterday, what's the reason behind this? A lot of public notice from our department about how to protect your vehicles. Don't leave your vehicles running. We've issued steering wheel locks to help prevent that. So that's helped the numbers go down. Overall, you can see it's down about 13.5%. Crimes against society. Those are crimes that involve narcotics, prostitution, gambling, things of that sort. And with the passing of the marijuana laws, which makes it pretty much legal now, those numbers are going down quite a bit. But we're still dealing with a lot of dangerous drugs, in particular fentanyl and meth. I did some numbers based on an interview that was done on Channel 4, child endangerment, child deaths from narcotics. In the year 2022, we had 43 deaths of minors, with the most of them being with the intake of fentanyl. It happens That's the choice of drugs for the family members, whoever. They leave it out on the table. Child comes across it, ingests the fentanyl, and next thing you know, there's a serious situation in 2023 in the state of Missouri, not just St. Louis County. This was in the state of Missouri. We had 43 deaths from children ingesting those drugs. Calls for service. Just a list of the different calls that we have. Sick cases being the most calls that we have, alarm soundings, domestic disturbance, things of that sort. Our North County precincts is the precinct that receives the most calls. Directed calls, they receive up to this date, they've received over 42,000 calls. They have initiated over 14,000 self-initiated calls. South County precinct being the second, they've had over 21,000 directed calls, over 11,000 self-initiated calls. Department-wide, up to this date, we had close to 294,000 calls directed and about 143 self-initiated calls. Those are the numbers that I have for our crime report. Just a couple other updates about what's going on with the St. Louis County Police Department. We're in the midst of doing some capital projects. You probably know by now that the third precinct police department is open now. It won't be long. Hopefully next week, we'll be moving into the new North County precinct. And we also have started construction on the new second precinct / intelligence building in Maryland Heights. That's all I have for my report.
Thank you. I just have one question, and then we'll entertain questions from the other commissioners. These drug and these narcotic violations, I know the numbers will be skewed a little bit because of the new cannabis laws in Missouri and the lack of pursuit of what could have been offenses there. Do you know if you separate out the cannabis, do you know where the fentanyl and meth and other drugs would be on the violations trajectory?
The possession of
Yes.
fentanyl is a felony charge, and same way with the amount, depending on the amount of meth that's seized. And like I said, our drug units out there, our violent crime initiative, they come across a lot of these, a lot of controlled buys that we have. We'll come up with those particular drugs, but they are still out there.
Do you get a sense that fentanyl and other street drugs, if that's going up or down, or do you think it's maintaining?
It's probably maintaining at the same level. You know, sometimes we have big busts, but it's probably maintained at a certain level. They're out there.
Okay, great, thanks. Any other questions for the chief?
I do have a follow-up question to the chief.
Yes.
Good morning, Chief Gregory. Good to see you
Morning.
this morning. So one of my questions, first, I'm just as excited as you about Precinct 1. We just had a community of the whole Tuesday about Precinct 1,
Mhm.
about the actual construction of it, but I'm glad to know that hopefully they got the doors in. Do you know, did they get the doors? Because they were supposed to get them yesterday.
As a matter, they did get them.
Somebody did say yes. I appreciate that confirmation. So hopefully we can get those temporary occupancy permits on Friday
Correct.
and we can move in next week. Moving on, though, the notable events, use of force incidents. Do you know what's attributing to that increase? It's about a 17.1 increase for the use of force.
You know, and most of our use of forces, we have to document the use of force. We document the use of force as if someone we go to handcuff them for whatever reason.
Mhm.
They pull away from us. We have to grab them by wrist or whatever, and there's some type of force, as minor as that may be, and we have to document that as a use of force.
Right.
So sometimes it can be that minor, and that's why that number is probably as high as you see it now. And again, we categorize our methods of use of force.
So that breakdown of use of force, that categorization of their use of force is available to say what's those actual use of force
Yes,
for
ma'am.
those each incidents. So
Mhm.
I'll follow up with you from my office.
Yes,
on that.
ma'am.
And then lastly, this is not on here in your report, but this is something that is concerning in our community. And so I spoke up about this a couple of months ago in one of our meetings about the sex trafficking,
Mhm.
the increase in North County, and also missing young ladies in throughout North County. Is there any type of focus intentional effort to address that? Is there any type of task force? Is there any type of reporting, tracking according to those two issues?
Our special investigation unit, they investigate those offenses. I don't know if you remember, there was a couple of months ago, maybe at the last meeting, we had a high number of child trafficking incidents.
Mhm.
I think there was probably listed as about, 15 of them, but 10 of those events was just one incident itself where they came over with
Yeah.
that many victims.
Mhm.
We do have a unit that investigate those things. I can get you more numbers at our next meeting, or I get them to you personally as to the direction they're going to prevent some of those things. They do a
Thank-
lot of stings. They
Okay.
do a lot of phone calls, set up phone calls, tracking these suspects in reference to child trafficking and prostitution.
Thank you so much, sir. I would appreciate those numbers. Just as importantly is, again, what are the tactics that they're using to address the issue? So if you can get that, I would greatly appreciate it.
No
And
problem.
then if there is any type of legislation we may need to put in place to strengthen enforcement or to get more resources to be more focused
Mhm.
on this area, I would love to have a discussion with you about doing just such a thing.
I can do that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the chief? Okay, the next item on the agenda is our Save Lives Now anti-violence effort update. Tom Crease.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Tom Crease. I'm the Director of Violence Reduction out of the County Executive's Office for St. Louis County. For those of you who I have not had the opportunity to meet, a little bit background on me. I was a police officer for St. Louis County for about 8 years. Worked up in the North County precinct up in the Spanish Lake and Glasgow Village area. Moved into some specialized units, my last one being with our crisis intervention unit, where I was the homeless outreach officer for St. Louis County, where a lot of that job was coordinating community resources in conjunction with a lot of law enforcement initiatives and addressing homelessness. Shortly after that, I left for career opportunities with ARCA. It is an opioid clinic in St. Louis City, where I was a substance use counselor, as well as a community outreach coordinator, where I did direct clinical work with our unhoused population in St. Louis City and County. I then went and ran a homeless shelter down in Maryland Heights, Loaves and Fishes. I was their program director, where I continued to do a lot of street outreach for St. Louis County. Our human services would call and we'd go hang out with whoever they needed us to hang out with. So that's just a little bit about me. I've been in the job for about 2 months now. It's been good being back. Trying to identify and work the landscape of violence prevention within the area, build a little bit more situational awareness on that, so we can better support the overall St. Louis Save Lives Now initiative in reducing homicide by 20%. One of the big things we were looking at trying to move forward with is getting the hub director for Save Lives Now, which we were able to get about 2 weeks ago. His name's Brandon Sterling with United Way. He comes with a wide range of experiences in community development, and look forward with working with him in that kind of area. So I'm here to answer any questions with you guys or for you guys if you have anything for me. And right now, kind of just the big updates is, again, we have our hub director with East West Gateway, and we're also working with our technical assistance providers, the nationally recognized organizations who work specifically in community violence, on building up or establishing a strong framework on addressing violent crime in St. Louis. So
Thank you, Tom. I would
Sure.
I know you've only been here a few weeks. Can you tell us if you've identified where your area of focus is going to be with the information you have today?
yeah, yes, sir. So while we are working in conjunction with the regional effort for Save Lives Now, we have been getting to work on identifying some of those at-risk individuals and hotspot areas. And a lot of that is kind of identified within the first precinct area and Jennings. So it's been a good opportunity working with Ms. Webb in that space, identifying the supports needed and better building that community. So
Tom, I know that our department is getting a lot of information to you in reference to crime, in particular those areas, North County Precinct. Once you get that information with the position that you have,
Mhm.
where do you go with that?
So when I receive, whether it's historical data on locations and individuals, I use that for kind of that GIS and heat mapping, so we can best do targeted engagements for those communities and individuals for some more the more real time incidences. So if there is a violent altercation or incident or a homicide, that information's forwarded over to me, at which point we draft a kind of a referral to one of our community partners, and then they have their street engagement teams or urban engagement specialists who then connect with the victims of the incident as well as the offenders or those who are at risk for continuing violence. So
Does that information you get go to the hub director?
yes, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, hey. Hi. Yes.
Thank you so much. Mr. Crease, again, good to see you today. I know we've been in Glasgow together already and already extended the invitation for you to attend our next crime town hall. So you'll be accompanied with Captain Morgan and Chief Gregory if he's available. I want to thank the chief for getting the resources to make sure that we had you a part of the county execs team and making sure that we had your position filled with someone that is has a credible background, has knowledge, and has a vision on how we can actually move the needle in addressing our crime. I'm glad to see you hitting the ground running, boots on the ground, as some would say. One of my questions, so that was all a statement just to say thank you. Glad to have you. But one of my questions is, what do you think is the greatest challenge in getting that community engagement?
A lot of it, so going back on kind of my experiences with working in the unhoused population and those living with substance use, a lot of it is that coordination of care, being able to identify the individuals and spaces that need that and making sure that they're getting the appropriate care needed. There's no one size fits all type idea when working with an individual who's in a level of crisis, whether mental health, substance use, or violence. We want to make sure that they're connected with individuals and organizations that can best support them and their needs. So that coordination of care is going to be the bigger piece and component of that.
Thank you, Mr. Creason. I would add to that, for those individuals, that's definitely the most important. So they have all the resources that they need,
Mhm.
and they're not bouncing back and forth between a night stay in the county and then back right where they came from. The other thing I would like to acknowledge is the engagement with the community is the trust factor. And I want to commend St. Louis County and Captain Morgan from Precinct 1 on them coming up with uh, real-time, I won't say solutions because it's a work in process, but building that credible trust. And so what I'm referring to is those roll calls that are in the community, those walking through the community and knocking on doors and saying, hey, this is who we are. There's no issues. We're just introducing ourselves. I've had community members, and especially Miss Tammy, who's a leader in Glasgow, reach out to me and say, it's making a difference. They're more opening up to talk. I would just encourage that to be consistent. I know it was a pilot between Glasgow and Castle Point. I would like to see that continued on as a part of the regular battle rhythm of the precinct and of the force. So thank you so much for that, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other questions for Tom? Okay, thank you, Tom. We're glad to have you on board. It's really exciting.
Thank you.
Department of Justice Services update. Director Best.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, if I had to describe justice services in one word over the last several months, it would be very busy. With that being said, next slide, please. Next slide. We started off, as indicated, that I would early on in February, that the first order of business I believe was important was to start conducting what I call staff feedback sessions, which ultimately concluded on April 26th of 2024. And this was an opportunity for me to build relationships with staff, to learn of their needs. And some of the common themes that were noted from those conversations centered on training, retention, new hiring standards, processes for corrections officers, and 12-hour shift schedules. Staff wish to see an increase in training for new officers, along with ongoing professional development opportunities, incorporate basic aptitude tests for corrections officer applicants, and reincorporate the 8-hour shift schedule. In May of 2024, because I think it was important to communicate with all that helps to make up the justice services within the building. So in May of 2024, I met with residents who are housed at the facility. And some of the common themes from them was staff interaction, increased resident programming, and food services. In August of 2024, I also met with persons under supervision. As you all know, Justice Services makes up pretrial as well as probation. And I met with those persons under supervision. Their main theme primarily involves supervision-related fees. And consideration was also given to data from other available reports with respect to Justice Services and their progress over the years. Ultimately, we are looking to utilize this data for the purposes of re-reviewing and developing our organizational mission, our vision and guiding principles, along with developing a long-term strategic plan. We have a committee from within that we call as the Directors Committee that will be meeting in the very near future to start taking a look at further that data and how to move forward with it. Again, recruitment of corrections officers was of concern. Staff recruitment of quality corrections officers continue to be an essential need of justice services. And again, this is all feedback coming from our servants, our public servants at Justice Services. As of September 11th, 2024, there were 43 vacant full-time corrections officers positions. This number obviously continues to fluctuate. We have about 10 applicants pending a start date right now within the next week or two, which would reduce this number of vacant positions. In addition to today, we have a host of interviews that are occurring throughout today, which would further reduce this number. But again, I want to stress it is a fluctuating number. Nevertheless, our recruitment efforts have been as follows. Next slide, please. During the summer months, Justice Services partnered with the St. Louis County Library. We hosted multiple community-based career fairs throughout the St. Louis County area. We felt that it was important, as opposed to having folks always coming to the Justice Services Center, having transportation issues, not being able to make it, that we actually go out to the people. And we went out to a variety of libraries throughout the county, giving folks the opportunity to not have to worry about traveling to Clayton, but travel to a library near them where we were hosting these community-based career fairs. To date, we visited about 5 locations throughout the county, ensuring our efforts to further diversify our applicant pool, which I also deem to be important. We have one remaining career fair on September 19th, 2024 at Rock Road Library in St. Anne, Missouri. From our community-based career fairs, we've acquired over 60 attendees. We've had 22 that we've had to disqualify. We've had 22 hired, and right now we have another 11 still pending at some point of the phase within the hiring process. Our community-based career fairs are in addition to normal weekly efforts to recruit, interview, and hire. So we still, in addition to the community-based career fairs, we still go through the normal process of having the recruitment going on each week here in Clayton. With the community-based career fairs, we procured radio advertisements. You may have heard some on the radio to promote our community-based career fairs, participated in other community career fairs. We're leveraging social media and utilized a recruitment firm in terms of the Walls Group to assist with identifying potential future criminal justice practitioners. If I can borrow a line from one of my colleagues, you know, we have assumed a position that we don't want to give the illusion of what we call posting and hoping. We're actually out in the community trying our best to bring folks in to Justice Services to serve. Next slide, please. One of the highlights that we've had during Corrections Officer Week, which is celebrated each year during the first week of May, Justice Services celebrated by recognizing 12, at least then 12 cadets at the time who completed basic training. The ceremony was held at Memorial Park, where we were joined by the St. Louis County Police Department's Honor Guard. And I'm proud to say that this program has motivated many of our staff to actually volunteer and restart our own in-house honor guard. So hopefully, Chief, we don't have to call on you next year, but we do need you to help train them. But also during this event, we acknowledge staff who were recently promoted during a period of time, and that's going to be a continuous thing that we do, ranging from positions of corrections captain to case managers. We're planning our next promotional ceremony during the month of December of this year. Next slide, please. With respect to our organization, one of the first things that I believe is you have to have a structure in place before you can continue to move forward. Without a solid structure, things tend to fall apart. So one of the things that we have looked at is our organizational structure. And Justice Services is presently undergoing reorganization, where under our restructuring plan, Justice Services will operate under three main divisions. One is security, the second is programs, and the third is administration. Right now, the way it's set is security is one, and then programs and administration has been combined. And I think it's needed to separate those two entities. Security will consist of staff with a direct relationship to security operations, such as bonding, property room, transportation, training, classification, and more. Staff, as I indicated earlier, spoke about the need to train staff. We have concentrated on developing a training division within Justice Services that now consists of a team of 7, and they address 3 main areas. We have one, address new officer orientation, new officer, onboard academy. The second is annual in-service training. In other words, you receive basic training, but each year you need to also receive a certain number of credit hours, reiterate some of the most essential trainings so that you don't lose sight of things such as use of force, such as, or as we would say, officer response, tactical training, IPC skills, et cetera. Those things must be reiterated on an ongoing basis. And then the third would be ongoing professional development, because again, this is about trying to develop people and getting them ready to continue to carry on the mantle throughout a variety of positions within Justice Services. So ongoing professional development needs to be essential to the success of Justice Services. And further, we are expanding our personnel in classification from 4 to 6 with the pending position for a leader there as a supervisor. This expansion helps to provide round-the-clock service within our classification department. So in fact, we'll be interviewing for that 6th and final spot for classification this afternoon. In the area of programs, our programs division will consist of 3 separate units: pretrial services, institutional case management, and probation. Again, trying to clearly define, units within Justice Services, as well as make sure that we have the appropriate leadership to lead each of these units to streamline and provide for a much more efficient operation. And also the third is administration, again, which consists of your compliance, your grant management, accreditation, accounting and finance, food services, et cetera. In the area, next slide, please, of security operations. Obviously, our resident population, for those that keep track, continue to rise. As of September 12th, 2024, we have a total resident population of 1,271. The population consists of high-level Class A and B felonies. We have a high number of Class D and E felonies remaining in custody. Pretrial detention remains the leading cause of our jail population as resident stays in custody are longer. We are seeing a variety of cash-only bonds, which to some indigent residents could indeed equate to a no bond status. This does not mean, and this should not be interpreted, please, that they are being issued no bonds. I'm just saying a cash-only bond for someone that is indigent, that cannot afford to make bond, can come across as equate to the same status of having no bond due to the lack of financial resources. With a high custody status involving some low-level felonies, it's important we look to utilization of pretrial services supervision where possible, which helps to, one, provide relief for our jail population, and two, serve as an alternative to detention. Through pretrial services supervision, criminal defendants can continue supporting themselves and their families while being actively monitored under the least restrictive conditions of bond, which assist in addressing risk to the community, as well as non-appearance in court, which are two of the most prevalent when we're talking about pretrial services, addressing risk to the community, public safety, and addressing non-appearance, risk of non-appearance. Next slide, please. When you're taking a look at your population with respect to the jail, then again, looking at it in comparison to the pretrial supervision, pretrial services supervision, you see our population is relatively low, which is why I say we are underutilizing our pretrial services supervision program. The number of criminal defendants supervised by pretrial services, as you can see, decreased beginning in June of 2021. I think it's safe to assume this may be linked to the COVID vaccine effect. However, it is also my belief this is an area where justice services can certainly improve to better assist the court for greater confidence to increase our active pretrial services supervision enrollment. So this is something that we as justice services are certainly working on because we want to be able to present to our court and hopefully assist the court with increasing our pretrial services supervision population. Just as an example, one concern is that despite the low pretrial services supervision enrollment, our failure to appear rate is 27% to date in FY24. Again, this assumingly stems from technical violations. However, our goal is to better define for an improved response where pretrial is concerned. So we do in justice services also have work to do in that area. With respect to pretrial, we are in the process of revamping our pretrial services supervision program. Again, we have increased staffing from 3 to 6. We're finalizing for presentation before our court. And I want to say, I've had a very good relationship with our presiding judge in having these kinds of conversations and those conversations to continue because we all obviously want what's best. So we are looking at finalizing criteria, and we'll share it with our presiding judge as well for that feedback as we work in partnership. Concerning suitability of pretrial services supervision. This involves looking at more than just the public safety assessment, risk assessment instrument. I do believe we need to look at more than just the PSA. We're talking about developing a pretrial investigative worksheet for the purpose of A, collecting data from criminal defendants prior to their initial appearance, B, verifying information on the front end is more than just reporting the data. We need to verify as practitioners. We should verify that information on the front end. And then that allows us to tender a recommendation to the court concerning suitability for pretrial services, which ultimately would help the court in rendering some of their decisions. This is a standard procedure governing pretrial services as noted by the National Association of Pretrial Services Association, Pretrial Justice Institute, and many more. For those under community supervision, we want to incorporate risk-based community supervision. This places our community corrections officers out in the communities. We are developing contact standards for this response. Community corrections officers will receive proper training and the tools necessary for facilitating community visits. And when I say community visits, I don't, think that, low-risk folks, we would need to be out, but we need to be out in the community more for our moderate and our higher risk persons under supervision. Our goal is to embrace the concept of evidence-based practices where we rely on the science and what works in community supervision, treatment services such as mental health and substance abuse, as well as you've heard in the past with Thomas Abt, cognitive behavioral programs such as CBT, or in other words, CBT, are essential parts of community supervision and is aligned with the current county violence reduction efforts, especially with respect to incorporating CBT. Next slide, please. Next slide. I think I blew over that one. We developed, where pretrial service is concerned, a dashboard. And this is a public dashboard on our Justice Services website for all the public and stakeholders to be able to see. It's just like how we have one for the jail population. Outcome measures are important, especially when you're talking about evidence-based practices. So like our jail population dashboard, and in the spirit of evidence-based practices, Justice Services intends to evolve in community supervision and rely on data to aid in our decision-making. We have developed a dashboard for the public and stakeholders to review our pretrial services supervision program. This dashboard is available, again, via the Justice Services website, of which I would invite everyone to review alongside our jail population data dashboard. It remains a work in progress, so the public and stakeholders should expect additional data to be included on the dashboard in the coming future. Next slide, please. As you all know, we've had our MacArthur grant for some time, so wanted to just give some data as it relates to outcomes there. Efforts linked to the MacArthur grant has been underway for quite some time. We've had this population review team. It is my understanding, however, I recognize that the MacArthur grant is set to expire in sometime in 2025. But from this endeavor, again, the population review team was formed, which consists of stakeholders of the St. Louis County criminal justice community. The population review team sessions are held 3 times per month, excluding December of each year. In 2024, there were 22 sessions held, resulting in 376 cases reviewed. It should be noted, though, that some cases are reviewed twice and therefore they're counted twice. Of the 376 cases reviewed, the recommendation breakdown has been divided for presentation purposes into 3 categories. No formal recommendation, where there was 133 cases looked at and no formal recommendations was made. Recommendations given but not a release, about 48. And then in release approvals, 195. The breakdown of the latter 2 categories are shown on the slide there. Finally, I want to say, these last 7 months or 8 months, I think I stopped counting. It has definitely been very busy, but I remain thankful to the staff of Justice Services for their untiring efforts. These folks put in a lot of hours and that they are performing under some very tough terrain. And I do want to wish to publicly, as we do in Justice Services, to applaud them for all of their continued efforts in making Justice Services continue to make it operational, functional, and just leading the way to do their best.
Thank you, Director Bess, for your report. And there's a lot of information there. And I think the meat of it comes in the last 3 slides, and then it reflects on everything you're trying to do to run a safe corrections facility. But it seems like the population review team is kind of the gatekeeper, facilitator of trying to match our decrease in crime in the community with our increase in jail population, which is a bit of a dilemma for us. We certainly want to make sure that the folks that might have a path back into the community have a pathway to a job and are productive members of the community. But is this a resource issue on your population review team, or is there another piece of this that can help us address the growing jail population in the presence of decreasing crime in the community?
Yeah, I think the population review team is just one aspect of how we can really try to control and manage our jail population, as well as trying to assist in the successful transition of persons under supervision. So I don't think, even with or without the MacArthur grant, I think this population review team concept should still continue. What I would suggest is that we really look very carefully at our pretrial services program. Community corrections, consist of pretrial, nationwide in many respects. I mean, I just returned back from a conference early, from New Orleans, which is the National Association of Pretrial Services Agencies. And for the first time, I took 3 staff members with me. And one of the things that they stated to me was, we never knew that this existed. We never knew, and they saw over 1,300 people at this conference. And in fact, one community corrections officer said, we met somebody from Guam at this conference. So I think if we, concentrate not just on PRT, but also take a look at our what we're doing with pretrial services. Again, that one-on-one contact between criminal defendants and, in this case, community corrections officers to help in successful transition. They're out in the communities. They can continue to take care of their families. They can continue to take care of themselves. They can remain employed. There's research out there that talks about, how if they're successful on pretrial, how it can possibly transition over to their success even at the time of sentencing. So I think, again, we have to do our job as justice services, and I've talked to the presiding judge, and I agree, pretrial does need to, we need to evolve, which we're working on evolving as justice services. And I think if we can get a healthy, solid, strong pretrial services program up and running, I really do think you will see some changes.
Well, I guess as we have the chair of the county council here in the county executive, and a lot of the reason why we convene this group is trying to address problems that cross jurisdictions. But if this is a resource issue, we should talk about it, because the folks, the increasing jail population, we can recognize that there's some folks there who may not need to be there, especially in the presence of decreasing crime. And we know that we have work in the community that needs to be done, and families that we would like to not disrupt if we can avoid it, if there's a pathway to safely avoid it. So if this is a resource question, or we need more resources into a work group, or we need more people at the table, we'd kind of look to you all for recommendations on how to put that together and what you need to address this complex question.
And I would say, Dr. Page, it would be both. It would definitely be both from the resource standpoint. And I would tell you, one of the things that we're definitely doing is making sure that we develop that structure as well, so we can build that structure and be able to, because not everybody even knows what pretrial really is. I think sometimes people mistaken pretrial services supervision with pretrial detention, and those are 2 different entities. Pretrial detention is one thing, pretrial services supervision is another, and that's where we would all come together, because you have community corrections officers out in the community relying on trying to identify more resources so we can continue to help. We work with the courts to try to identify more resources, work with county council, work with executive's office. So definitely resource issues from the manpower standpoint, resource issues from community entities to bringing everybody together. It certainly is an all hands on deck approach.
Any other comments?
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. I would first of all like to commend Director Bess on the efforts that he has made thus far in boosting and improving justice services overall, but in particular in the area that we're discussing now, which is pretrial services. I think that he has hit the key here on many points, but one of which is the confidence that the judiciary would have in pretrial services, in the structure, in the supervision, in its performance, and in the information that it is able to confidently supply to the courts. And I think that the director is made great strides, and I expect that will continue to improve. I will publicly say what I have said privately, which you have an open invitation to address the court en banc when you feel that it's the appropriate time regarding pretrial services and its structure and oversight. And the only question that I would ask you to look into, and I don't expect an answer today, is in the use of the PSA. And the court's concern regarding that PSA is this. My understanding in reviewing the literature on those tools is that they need to be locally verified. And it is not clear to me, nor to the court, that the PSA that we're using has been locally verified. So I would ask you to look into that. But I, again, thank you and I thank you for Mr. Haywood, who joins us each Tuesday at our presiding judge meeting. It's been extremely helpful.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I would say, I do not believe, but I will go back and double check with respect to validation of the PSA locally. I do not believe it has been locally. I will say, though, that is definitely an important aspect. And we would have to ask ourselves in continued conversations, is the PSA the instrument that we should be using?
I agree.
I have, my reservations sometimes on risk assessments, because I do find that sometimes risk assessments can certainly come across as being biased a bit. So I'm not saying that the case, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that the case in this situation, but it is something that, I do want to look further at with respect to the PSA itself. And I think we do have some things that are, before the council for approval, where we can bring in some experts to really take a look at everything of what we are trying to do with respect to pretrial. But I will also say too, that, this is why we want to look at pretrial service supervision as a whole, and not just look at the risk assessment. The risk assessment is just one instrument, one tool in the tool belt, so to speak, to do. We have to look at, those early investigations when we're interviewing people at the onset, at the time of their arrest. I think we have to make decisions on, do we want to interview everybody, or do we want to just interview C, D, and E felonies? Because other ones may not be bondable offenses. Who do we want to interview? And then what data are we collecting? What data are we verifying? And then using that data from our community corrections officer standpoint to then make recommendations to the court. So I think it's just the risk assessment is one tool in the toolbox. We just have to identify those others.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would just like to ask, I guess I missed this, or maybe other people think this. Could you tell us what PSA stands for and is? We don't, so for those of us that don't do this every day.
Well,
Yes.
go ahead.
It's the public safety assessment. It's a risk assessment tool that looks at certain factors. And based on those factors, scores, 2 scores, I believe,
Yes.
are generated from that. And then that's what, the court and practitioners can look at to define whether something is a low risk, something is a high risk, or somewhere in the middle.
Okay. Well, I can see why that would be an important tool.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Other
you for
questions?
Thanks for
Yes.
clarifying that, 'cause I was over here taking some notes on that.
Well, eventually we get it from the context, but sometimes it's better just to ask.
I have a follow-on.
Yes, go ahead.
To Director Best. You were mentioning about when you did your speak and listen sessions, I'm sorry, feedback sessions, we call them something different, but same thing, getting feedback from your stakeholders. One of the feedback that came back from the staff is about the reduction or going back from a 12-hour shift to the 8-hour shift. And one of the reasons that was put in place was because of a staffing issue, right? To keep us from having to spend so much money on overtime, then they expanded to the 12-hour shift. Knowing that, what is the assessment of going back to a 12-hour shift? And do you have adequate staff? I noticed you mentioned your vacancies at, I think you said 43 vacancies.
Yes.
How would that be impacted to your bottom line?
No, and I appreciate the question. It's a moving target right now. I will say this, I can't speak obviously for how this all came about with the 12-hour staffing. But I would say a lot of the staff has probably changed since then. So you're dealing with a totally different staff of who may have, if it was a vote, and I believe it was, voted or expressed interest in 12 hours versus 8 hours. But I can tell you, we sent out a survey to staff several months ago. And I was all creative with how to try to pull people to respond to that survey. And 144 individuals responded to that survey. And 58% of them indicated that they wanted to transition to an 8-hour schedule. 12 hours is extremely, extremely long, especially under the circumstances. I mean, I recognize there are some other jails that may operate under 12-hour schedule. But, we're dealing with a different generation of staff. They want that health and wellness, they want that balance,
Mhm.
and they are asking for that 12-hour schedule. 10-hour schedule, I think, was 22%, and 12 hours was 21% out of that 144 that responded. So in terms of how it's going to affect our bottom line, we're certainly looking at it. So I definitely don't have a definitive, answer, but we're certainly looking at how it's going to affect that bottom line. Right now, we're just trying to make sure that we have enough staffing. We want enough staffing where, even our residents can be able to be out and not do this whole rotational thing. But we want our residents out. We want our staff to be comfortable. We have a lot of correction officers, are single mothers, and they have childcare opens up at 6, and we have, staff starting at 6. So I don't want staff to have to make the decision, their family obligations with the addressing the childcare or coming to work on time, So we are giving this some serious look. We're executing on this very cautiously. I can say conversation on this started then, and then execution on surveys started back in June. So we're not tiptoeing, but we're walking very cautiously because we know we have some that want the 12 hours, but we have a large majority that want 8-hour schedules.
Thank you, sir, and I appreciate that thoroughness in being attentive to the work-life balance of the actual staff. With that, we want to make sure that we have adequate funds, right, to pay that staff, because then it becomes an issue as well. We're not competitive again, and so we went through the challenges of we were so much overtime for staff that it was eating through all of your budget, and then on the other side of that is it was the amount of people who was getting all of that overtime. So again, as you said, you have a staff turnover. You probably have a whole new workforce right now in your system, in supporting your system. And so I just think that it will be value added to get that information, especially when it's time to come to the council. You got an alligator come across when it's time to come to the council, so we can have that picture and making those good judgment calls. One of the things that you said that sparked my interest, and I haven't been to visit the jail since you become director, but I would go, unfortunately, quite frequently because of the issues that was having. You talked about staff support. There was a strong effort to ensure that there were 2 officers, correction officers per pod, per shift, for your predecessors. Is that still the goal and still being maintained at this time?
I would say that is still in place. Not necessarily go because it's in place.
It's in place.
It's in place. And what they have, what the policy does state is that if there's a pod where you don't have 2 officers, where there's 1, then there's only a certain number of residents that could come out, not the entire pod. So, but I will tell you, for the most part, 2 officers are present. I will tell you, we have looked at ways of how we can be creative in our hiring with bringing folks in. For example, instead of having individuals, like we may hire somebody today, let's say, and then the next class is 4 weeks later. What we've done is we don't let them wait in 4 weeks because they may find another job at that point. So what we've started to do is the next available beginning of the pay period, we will bring them in to help and serve as a secondary. We'll take them through an orientation, a mini training before the actual academy class, just so that we can satisfy and keep those 2 officers in a pod.
Okay. I appreciate you being creative there. That is all. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
I forget to continue it.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I was just curious as to why is there so many vacancies? Is there a retention problem or because of increase of the population or?
No, I would say where corrections is concerned, it's a nationwide problem. So that's 1. 2, I would say some of them don't want to work 12 hours. And that's been blatantly clear that they don't want to work 12 hours. Some have found that corrections may not just be for them. And I can understand that too. I mean, we're finding when we hire some people, we'll bring them in, and then during that initial, few weeks of the academy, we put them on the floor just so that they can get a taste and see what's going on. And some come to that honest conclusion, this is not for me. And you know what? I rather lose them, at that point, because to go through weeks and weeks and weeks of training, and then you think you got it all together, you're starting back over again. So I think it's just a combination of many things, but retention, I would say, is a nationwide problem with corrections.
And I gotta admit, it is a hard job, so I can kind of understand the retention
Yeah.
part of it, so.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. The Crime Commission is an important part of St. Louis County, gives us a chance to get together and talk about these complex issues. And one of the main roles of this commission is to identify areas in this process that need more resources. And I think we've done that today, and then try and direct the resources to the right places. Our next meeting will be October 24th, so please mark your calendars for October 24th. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.